Bobby Lee Claremont and the Criminal Element by Jeannie Mobley. June 1st, 1923, Central Station, Chicago, Illinois, 7:45 a.m. Sister Mary Magdalene's business apparently took somewhat longer than she had expected, because I spent the next 3 days working from dawn to dusk in the house of the Good Shepherd. The sisters had plenty for me to do, mostly in the bowels of the orphanage, boiling soiled diapers, scrubbing floors, peeling hundreds of pounds of potatoes before supper, and washing mountains of plates afterwards. On the evening of the third day, Sister Mary Magdalene announced we'd be on the 8:20 a.m. train for home the next day. As the sun rose, we were on a streetcar bound for the station. I met your friend, Nanette O'Halloran. She speaks very warmly of your kindness to her on the train, the sister said as we rattled along. Did she get the insurance money? I asked. Yes, I believe she did. I let out a breath, feeling as if I'd been holding it for a long time. That's a relief. She inquired about you. I told her we would be returning to New Orleans on the train today. She wishes you all the best. I nodded, thanked her, and looked back out the window. I would miss Nanette and the others, or at least some of them. My ticket north had not been wasted, even if I hadn't gotten what I came for. I had helped her get a good home and a family for herself and her child. The train was already loading when we arrived on the platform, but before we found our car to board, a little streak charged across it toward me and grabbed me around the waist. Bobby Lee, you're back! Terence said excitedly as he gave me a big squeeze. Are you coming back to New Orleans with us? Hi, Terence, I said, peeling him off me and looking around. I didn't think you'd still be in Chicago. Terence giggled. We ain't still in Chicago, Bobby. We've been back to New Orleans and back up here since we saw you last. Oh, right, I said, smiling. Where's Leon? Wait till you see, he said, and grabbing my free hand, he pulled me and the sister through the crowd to the baggage car, where a whole crew of men were loading trunks and crates. There, in a new uniform, was Leon. He looked my way and flashed a smile, but didn't stop what he was doing. He got a real job? Terence nodded, beaming with pride. But he ain't old enough, I said. Shh, Terence said, but then couldn't resist adding, behind his hand, but in a clear voice, he fibbed. So if Leon's got a job, who's looking after you? I asked. This is my granddaddy's last run. He's riding home in style, and me with him. He says that once we get back to New Orleans, he and me gonna stay home when my pop is cutting cotton. I'ma miss Leon, though. Leon came near us to retrieve a trolley full of luggage. You won't have time to miss me, he said. You'll be going to school. What about you? I asked. Leon shrugged. My mama schooled me enough before she died, he said. It didn't seem quite fair to me, but as I watched the muscles strain across his shoulders and back as he pushed the trolley, I saw something else, too. I saw his pride in doing a good, honest job to take care of his family. Leon would be all right. What an enterprising young man, Sister Mary Magdalene said, apparently observing the same. You could learn a thing or two from him, Robert. Yes, ma'am, I said. I think I already have. How come you're going back to New Orleans? Didn't things work out in Chicago? Terence asked, eyeing Sister Mary Magdalene with suspicion. No, not so good. Maybe you could come live with us now that Granddaddy's staying, Terence said. I don't think so, Terence, but thank you. Terence looked momentarily crestfallen, but then another thought perked him up. But we can sit with you on the train, right? At least till we get to Kentucky? I glanced up at Sister Mary Magdalene and she nodded. That would be mighty fine, Terence, I agreed. It looks like someone else has come to say goodbye, the sister said, pointing. I looked where she indicated to see Malcolm approaching, accompanied by a woman in a burgundy dress and hat carrying a baby. It took me a few seconds to realize it was Nanette, no longer dressed and veiled in widow's weeds. I glanced around, nervous about whoever might be with them, but I saw no one. Nanette smiled at me. I relaxed and smiled back. Bobby Lee, I'm glad we caught you. The sister said you'd be returning this morning. She pressed a cookie tin into my hands. For your journey. Thanks. I guess everything has worked out for you? She nodded, looking grave. The money came through, though most of it went to O'Banion to pay off the debt at the Cajun Queen. That ends Jimmy's involvement with the Northsiders. A ghost of pain passed across her face at the mention of Jimmy, as I figured it would for a while. Things working out now didn't change the fact that he was dead. Nanette drew in a deep breath before she spoke again. And I signed over my interest in the club to Alphonse. Clovis thought maybe I should keep it, but there are too many memories there. The look of pain came back, pulling at my own heartstrings. I knew exactly what she meant. Anyway, she continued, knowing Alphonse, he will entangle the place in debt again in no time, and I sure don't need to be involved in that. Now she smiled, and I could see it was a smile of relief. She was more beautiful than ever. That's good, I said, then felt embarrassed for no reason at all, so I added, I wish you the best. She blushed and fidgeted with the baby's blanket. The thing is, I've thought about what you said at the funeral, about love and family. You must have come from a very special family to understand that. I shook my head. No, ma'am, I never had a family, but my mother loved me very much, and I've always had the sisters. Nanette nodded. I never had a family either, not until I joined up with Clovis and his boys. They were like a family to me, but I didn't rightly understand that. I thought my baby needed a bona fide family, one that shared his blood. But these folks in Chicago, their home is so cold, I guess. My son will have a proper family here, but not proper love, and that's what I figure most makes a house a home, just like you said. I'm sure they must love Jimmy's son in their own way, I said, but my talent for telling good lies must have slipped away with my newfound goodness. She shook her head. I'm leaving Chicago with the Clovis Dupre Orchestra, Bobby Lee. Like I said, they've been my family all along. I was just too blind to see it. We won't have a big house or a lot of money, but I don't think we need that to have a home. I glanced at Sister Mary Magdalene, expecting her to condemn Nanette's decision. But if she had such thoughts, she was keeping them locked behind an unreadable expression. I don't think so either, I said. I looked at Malcolm, who still stood silently behind her. Are you headed back to the Cajun Queen? Nope. Malcolm no longer works for Mr. Bugeaud, Nanette said. He went too far hurting you and Miss Nanette, Malcolm said. I'm going with Miss Nettie in the orchestra. Someone needs to take care of the baby while she's on stage, and I'm tired of having to bully folks. I almost laughed at the thought of big Malcolm playing nursemaid to the tiny baby, but then I remembered the tender look that had come over him when he spoke to me of Nanette before, and I realized that just like me, there was more to him as well. Nanette glanced at the sister. We come to meet you because we thought you might like to come with us, Bobby Lee. We're headed for Cleveland in an hour, then on east and eventually to New York. Clovis could use another hand hauling instruments and equipment. He's offering you the job, but it's more than a job, really. Like I said, Clovis and the boys are family. That's not a real family, and it's certainly not a home, Sister Mary Magdalene said, pulling me a step toward the train. Home is where the heart is, sister, I replied. Isn't that what the Bible says? I don't think the Bible says any such thing, she said, giving me that look that said, why didn't you pay attention to what I teach you? The orchestra lives on the road a good deal at a time, so it wouldn't be a home in the traditional sense, Nanette admitted. And we aren't a true family in the eyes of the law, what with some folks being colored and some not. Some folks might call that wrong. We are all God's children, the sister said stiffly. But he'd be loved and cared for and want for nothing, I promise you that. I'd love to come with you, I said, getting ready to make my apology. There was no way the Sisters of Charitable Mercy would release me from my penance to go live the sinful life of traveling musicians. Then a miracle happened. Sister Mary Magdalene's grip on my hand loosened, then released. The decision is yours, Bobby Lee, she said. You'll be 14 in a few months, so you are old enough to decide. I drew in a deep breath. There was no decision to be made. Thank you, sister. Then you won't be riding the train with us? Terence asked, his little face puckering up in dismay. I admit it. It gave a firm tug on my heartstrings. I'm afraid not, Terence. I'm going with Nanette and Malcolm, and you're going home with your granddaddy. And I get to go to school, but I'm going to miss you, Bobby Lee. Tell you what, I said, squatting down eye to eye with him. How about I send you a postcard when I get where I'm going? Where are you going? Terence asked. I shrugged. All over, I guess. I'd like to get a postcard from all over, he admitted. So Nanette dug a pencil and paper out of her pocketbook. and we wrote down an address that Leon carefully dictated to us. It cheered up Terence, and I admit I like the idea of keeping up a correspondence. After all, Terence and Leon were the first real friends I'd ever had. "You'll write me back too, won't you?" I asked. "Soon as I learn to write," he promised. Then he looked forlornly at the cookie tin in my hands. "I suppose if you ain't coming with us we don't get cookies?" he said. I laughed and gave him the tin. After all, I was going off with Nanette and Clovis and little Jimmy Jr. Somehow I figured there'd be plenty of sweetness to go around, even without the cookies. With that I turned to the sister. "I'm sorry I can't pay back the poor box just yet." "Oh, don't worry about that," she said. I stared, wondering what had come over her. Her eyebrows arched up in reply. "I met your friend, Dean O'Banion, when he came looking for you at the house of the Good Shepherd." My stomach knotted at the mention of the name. I had forgotten all about his promise. "He came looking for me?" "I had a little chat with him, and through the grace of God he found it in his heart to make a sizable contribution to the Sisters of Charitable Mercy in the house of the Good Shepherd. Such nice Catholic boys, those Irish." I admit my mouth was hanging open. I thought I'd have to go all the way to Chicago to learn the art of the scam, when I'd been living with a master all this time. "Are you sure it was the grace of God, sister?" "I will say this one last time, Robert. The Lord works in mysterious ways." And with that she pulled me into a tight embrace. "Just remember, there will always be a home for you with the Sisters of Charitable Mercy, should you need it. I will pray that you won't." I nodded, feeling surprisingly choked up. "I will write," I said. "I promise." "Don't worry about Bobby Lee, sister," Nanette said. "He's been my guardian angel since we left New Orleans. Now I'll be his." Sister Mary Magdalene smiled and patted the beat-up suitcase she carried, which I now realized also carried O'Banion's contribution. "That's our Robert E. Lee Claremont, a guardian angel," she said. The whistle blew and the conductor called out his final warning from the train. Sister Mary Magdalene sprang into action, herding Terence aboard as if he was her charge. I turned to Nanette and Malcolm. "Cleveland?" I said. "Cleveland," Nanette replied, threading her arm through mine and turning back toward the main terminal. "Platform 17. Clovis and his boys are waiting for us. Tell me, Bobby Lee, have you ever considered playing the piano? I could teach you. I'll be teaching Malcolm, too." I smiled as I walked. To think I had believed I would never have a home again. This wasn't anything like I had expected it to be. This was much better.